we are going to just graph real quick radical function. I did it by hand, but just using the calculator emulator, put in the square root of x, go ahead and hit the graph button, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to see this guy right here. And this is our square root function, and if we notice, our domain is anything greater than 0 because that's where the graph exists, and our range is anything greater than 0 for y's because it only works in the first quadrant where we only have positive x and positive y values. We did this in the video, but I wanted to show how we can do this in our calculators. Now, one of the other problems that we did was this one. We talked about finding the domain and range by graphing it. And so I wanted you guys to work with your calculators and actually look at the two graphs. What we did here in the actual screencast when we did some work is we graphed 16 minus x squared and ignored the radical and graphed it. And so the idea here is we can only take the radical of a positive value. So if you look at my mouse cursor, or if I hit the trace button on the graphing calculator, we are only, let me get there here real quick, here comes the cursor. At around this point, which is -4, I have a negative value. The minute that I cross over that point, though, even though x is negative, it produces a positive y value, which means I'd have a positive number underneath my radical, which means this number will work. So all these values on this side of the parabola will work. And that's how we got our inequality, where x was going to be between 4 and -4. And so that's how you can use your graphing calculator. Now notice, if I put in a square root, let me delete all this other stuff out. Okay, this is not working to my liking, so we're just going to start from scratch here. Second square root, and we're going to do 16 minus x squared, and we're going to go ahead and graph it. Now the graph is going to look different, and what I want to point out is notice how this little semicircle, that's our positive region that we got from a parabola. So that's how it changes what the parabola looks like. Notice right here, there's this empty gap where it is not displaying appropriately on the calculator. And depending on your version, you may show these values or not. I don't want you to be misled. It should be connected. So these two guys should be connected. And this is how we can work with our domain and range. You can either graph the parabola and look at the positive values, or you can graph it with the actual radical and just read the graph of the radical function. Either way is fine. And so for all these that we did in each of these lessons, you know, if you go to your graphing calculator, you just need to go ahead and work with the radical function. So even if I graph the line -4x plus 7 and graph it, forgot to put the negative symbol, I used minus instead of negative. Our domain is going to be only the positive values of the line. And so that means at this 0, which is going to be a positive 7/4, this to the left is where our domain would exist for the radical function. So if we're looking at the positive values of the graphs, that's going to tell us the domain.